Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next dungeon, but not the final one. There is still one dungeon remaining to be unlocked on our Legion Alpha journey. And this one is the Eye of Azshara. Yes, indeed. So this one is obviously, by the title, it's going to be the Naga instance. Watery graves bestowed upon many who dare venture inside here. And the first thing you're going to notice is it's incredibly open plan. I actually have shown a little bit of this dungeon in some various videos, but I haven't done a review of it. So here we go. This is again one of my top dungeons, and again bestows that idea and that feeling that I gave to you when I did the first dungeons, which were really the same design team made the Violet Hold and the fucking Halls of Valor who made the Eye of Azshara. It just makes no sense that dungeons like the Vault of Wardens and the Archway exist, or Neltharian's Lair for that matter exist, or even the Maw of Souls exist in a world with Darkheart Thicket, Blackrock Hold, Halls of Valor, and Violet Hold as well. It's just like, what? Really? This is so bizarre, Blizz. The up and down rollercoaster nature and quality is really all over the place, but it's fantastic that we do have some of the absolute best dungeons that I have seen in World of Warcraft, and Eye of Azshara is easily one of them. In here, you're going to encounter a wonderful 5 bosses. In this open plan scenario, going to take you from everything from Naga Queens all the way up to basically Alakia. For those of you who did progress during Cataclysm, I don't mean the transmog version where you kind of crunch him to smithereens in a few seconds. If you did progress on Alakia, you'll be like, whoa, baby, I know how to deal with this, but oh my god, nobody else does. Holy shit, everybody's dying. And yeah, it's one of the most wiped on bosses that I've been in Legion so far. Most of the time, if you do wipe on a boss, it's generally you come back and kill it. The final boss, the Wrath of Azshara, is indeed the boss that I've seen groups come back and wipe on again and again and again, especially as the boss is designed to increase in intensity as you move through it. So we'll get to that in a moment. Now, what you'll find is this open plan area does allow a variation in direction you want to go, but it's not as deep in terms of its choices as, say, something like the Archway, where you're going to get a couple of bosses and then some backtracking. This is a full loop circular dungeon that you're going to go through. And if you encounter your first boss, which will be Warlord Parjesh, you're going to hit your initial feeling, really, of how this dungeon plays out. Before we get there, though, we have some trash, of course. Now, the trash, again, as with pretty much every dungeon in Legion, is very cleverly designed, and in fact is always, and I reiterate this every video, these dungeons are designed with challenge modes in mind. So the normal version, and I have done the heroic version is available, so you'll see footage from both in the background, are designed in such a way that if you do it correctly, it's incredibly easy and quick. Start making mistakes, though, this trash is going to start really screwing you over. How does it screw you over in the Eye of Azshara? Does it just wreck your face completely? No. Actually, the trash is actually very, very weak so far, but again, that might change. This is alpha, we have tuning and numbers to go. But generally speaking, the trash doesn't particularly hurt. What it does do, though, is create scenarios that will drag it out a lot. And that is something that, particularly in your challenge mode runs, you're going to really want to avoid. So the way they've done it in this trash is quite simply, they can call turtles. You'll notice the turtles floating around in almost Firelands-esque sort of memory for me. And they're just stood around passively. I'm like, yeah, passive my ass. So you pull these, and then one of the trash is going to go, oi, turtles, come here. And you want to avoid that happening. Not a big deal in normal, not a big deal in heroic. But these turtles come in, they have a shitload of health, and they put shields on themselves, interruptible shields, that reduce the damage they take drastically. It's like 90% or something. So these are designed so if you're speedrunning the dungeon, that pulling the turtles is a big fucking no-no. It won't be too bad in normal and heroic, because you'll be able to just AoE them down pretty naturally and stun them and just kill them and all that kind of stuff. But in challenge modes, you really want to avoid that. And I could see that. I was like, yeah, I get what's going on here. This is like, don't let this happen. Of all the things this trash does, which is lots of casted spells and bows and arrows and stuff, the real danger here is whether or not they're going to pull these turtles into it and drag out this trash fight endlessly and really screw up your time. It wouldn't surprise me in the later tiers of challenge mode as if you fuck this up and the turtles do come in, that yeah, you might as well just reset at that point because you goofed it pretty badly. So moving through trash, as I said, is pretty easy. Even now, even in normal and heroic, tanks are doing enormous pulls of this trash because it just doesn't hurt that much, especially in the early stages, which then leads us to our first boss. This is a very linear, straight path down to the first boss, which will be Warlord Parjesh. Now, as expected on normal and heroic, the mechanics aren't a big deal. You can easily do it wrong and kill the fight, which is what it's supposed to be. You've got to remember, normal and heroics are designed with success in mind for a solo play experience. And some of you might disagree with that, but either way, the challenge mode system is designed for a group play satisfying experience. The normal and heroics are ones that you can queue solo and you should be able to defeat them. Otherwise, you get a very dissatisfying and very, very poor experience, and players leave the game in that count, and whether or not you agree with that is entirely irrelevant at this point. This is how the system's been since Wrath of the Lich King, and therefore we should probably get over the idea that random queuable content is supposed to be extremely hard. It's not. So what goes on here then? Well, Parjesh doesn't do much in and of himself. What he does do is start calling in some adds, healers, and stuff into the fight. What he has is the spear, and it gives you an incredible amount of time to notify you that, hey, there's a spear targeting you, bro. Maybe you want to do something about that. So your initial instinct will, of course, be, well, I want to get away from the rest of my group. Hopefully, you don't want to channel a spear through their face. That would be a bad idea. However, the trash has an incredible amount of health, and it kind of plays in. You can see here they're using a very old-school games mechanic, is trying to pre-warn you about stuff that might be going on in the future. So the trash that pulls the turtles and elongates it is kind of a hint that the first boss is going to do something that drags the fight out. And what drags the fight out is the spawning of these very large health pool adds that make the fight a lot more convoluted and difficult. They start increasing, obviously, the damage on the tank and the healing needed and all stuff. Then he's going to throw this spear. Now, as you might have surmised from what I've just told you, is the spear can absolutely be used to attack the adds. The actual trick here is very simple. It's just move behind the adds. And again, I don't want to go too much into the mechanics of the fights. I'd love for you guys to discover it for yourself, but I'm just giving you an idea of that when you're doing this dungeon, all the trash is giving you hints, even slight hints, that might come in a very different form on the boss, but they're absolutely a hint as to how you're supposed to be dealing with the boss properly, not in a case of just ganking it normally to collect fat loots. That's not what's going to happen. So after you defeat Warlord Parjesh, then, you're going to have a choice. Do you go left? Do you go right? I recommend you go right, by the way, as it's currently designed. That could change, but if it doesn't change, you should go right. The reason I say that is that it's going to lead you to one of the more difficult bosses and give you a nice pathway back into the central area, the central pit you've no doubt seen in the background. Now, you will note some FPS drops in here. My rig is obscene. It's one of the best you can pretty much have on the planet. It's a 980 Ti, it's a 5960X processor. It's overclocked by 40%. It's water cooled. It's got all the DDR4 in it and all that kind of shit. And still, yeah, massive FPS drops here. But that should be fixed. This tends to happen in World of Warcraft when something's not quite tuned or optimized correctly, and then when it comes to the final version, it's absolutely fine. A part of it is certainly they've hugely increased the draw distance of the game. You can look over Dalaran and you can see pretty much all of the Broken Isles in really good detail, by the way. So it's not a case that suddenly, like if you flew out of Dalaran in Wrath of the Lich King on an average PC, you would be pretty close to ICC at that point, but you wouldn't be able to see it. And then suddenly this giant fucking enormous building would pop into your view and you're like, oh shit, there's ICC. I get it. And some of you might encounter that now when you're going into transmog runs or whatever. So they'll fix that later. So don't worry if you see FPS drops in the background. It's not a case of bad encoding or anything like that. It's literally that it managed to drag my PC, which runs on average in a raid about 100 FPS. Yeah, I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that's what it does. But down in here, it'll drop to like 20, 30 sometimes if I look into the distance. So I spent a lot of time looking at the ground. So if that annoys you, I apologize. But it's just me countering FPS problems by not loading in the huge background that's going on. So as you move to the right, then you're going to encounter some more difficult trash, which is good. It's like a little scaling up of the damage that's going on. These things are going to smash the floor and cause serious damage to the tanks. And again, we still have the mobs that are going to call in turtles, so you're still capable of fucking this dungeon up. But another part of the reason I suggest you go right first is to try and minimize your wasted time. The last thing you want to do is come up against this stuff at the end of the dungeon and then struggle. But what we're going to do is run into the sea giants. We're going to move through here and run into the sea giants, and the sea giants that you'll fight are come in two variations, which of course, as I've said earlier, hints to exactly what the boss does. Now again, another interesting mechanic here. I'm not going to go over all this boss's mechanics, but King Deepbeard, not the most imaginative of names, I've got to say, King Deepbeard has a wonderful little mechanic which is going to trick you. You're going to get debuffed, and that debuff, if you don't read it, might look like, I need dispelling, I need something like that. In fact, what this debuff is telling you is, dude, you need to take a lot of damage. What? Yeah, you need to take some fucking damage. And I read it, I was like, oh, okay. I didn't expect it to read like that, but I get it. And the game gives you plenty of opportunities to take damage, which means if you're debuffed, you want to be taking damage. You want to to try and figure out ways of taking damage, and it gives you plenty of ways of doing that you'll see in the background. And if you're not debuffed, you obviously want to avoid damage. And this will then all lead to basically a Shatter, Gruul type stuff, and a combination of not taking damage to remove your debuff and taking the Quake Aftershock is going to be a bad time for everybody, even in Heroic. Heroic generally, I'm going to do a video on the Heroic impressions, but Heroic generally is just, you kind of need to be more aware of the mechanics now. It's not just going to fall over and die, even if you fuck this fight up completely. Will wipe you out. In the current tuning, I've seen groups just fall to the floor and die when I've been doing this on Heroic because they haven't done the mechanics. And people are like, you've got to get rid of your debuff. They're like, fucking Dispel. And it's like, you do it yourself, motherfucker. And all that kind of good shit that you'll get in your random pugs, as you guys well know. Run with a guild. Yeah, run with a guild. After he moves on, then we move down into the area proper. I say the area proper as this is the big open area, and you will see the last boss. You can see him from the very spawning of the dungeon, the Wrath of Azshara, but you'll notice he's protected by quite a large energy field, which is being supported by various Naga in a circle. And you'll be thinking, where do we go from here? But then you'll notice that the giant serpent comes out of the ground, and you're like, ah, okay. There's a boss right there. Yes, he is. He's a boss right there. And I was looking, I was like, oh, it's Megara. And is he going to do something Megara style? Yes. Yes, he is. He's going to do something absolutely Megara style. Not much for me to tell you here. I'd rather you figure it out yourself. But it's a snake boss. It's the most boring boss in here. It's not interesting. And sometimes it's extremely difficult for healers to deal with, especially when people get spread out. But needless to say, it's not an interesting boss, really. And on Heroic, I didn't notice any difference at all. Just be looking forward to the challenge mode version of it. Hopefully, it's got something more interesting going than what it actually is, but we'll wait and see on that. Now, you might think now I can go to Wrath of Azshara because I've cleared one of the bosses in here. Nope. You're going to have to go and deal with, which technically could either be boss number 2 or boss number 5, and that will be Lady Hatecoil. Now, just similar to Wrath of Azshara, Lady Hatecoil is protected by an energy field. And the clue, obviously, is that the Naga are dealing with this. They're supporting this field, and you have to deal with it. There are some in-game notifications telling you, oh, Lady Hatecoil is protected by a field. Why don't you go and seek out the fucking Naga that are obviously causing this field? Now, the great thing about this is there are several Naga doing this, causing Lady Hatecoil to have her field, but you don't have to kill them all. I really love this. Just a little bit of choosing by the players over which ones they want to deal with, depending on the route they take through the dungeon. Now, while I say you should go right at the beginning, it might turn out that it's faster for some reason to go left and maybe skip the trash that's to the right of Warlord Parjesh. Who knows? Who knows at this point? The math and stuff will come out later. So, as we move to Lady Hatecoil, I'd like to say I found this boss really fun. Now, this dungeon, I have to point this out here, this dungeon is really predicated on your group setup. If you only have 2 ranged, which are a healer and 1 ranged DPS, this dungeon is a fucking nightmare. It really is. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of mechanics that target ranged characters. And if you are like the only ranged DPS in here, which I've ended up doing several times, I've been here on mages, on hunters, and on my warlock, this dungeon was just super fucking annoying. An example of this was Lady Hatecoil has a very simple mechanic of providing islands to prevent, which you should stand in to prevent you getting damaged by certain abilities. However, she also has other abilities that destroy the islands, so you have to find a balance there over not just standing on an island for the entire fight, because you're going to destroy all the islands, and then she's going to be able to kill you pretty fucking quickly. Pretty Ricky Tick. Now, on top of that, though, she does have things that like spawn tornadoes that follow you around. I spent a lot of time on ranged characters just running around with 3 to 4 tornadoes following me because I was the only one that they could target. And I was like, this is really, really boring as fuck. And it would make me not want to be here as a single caster. Now, I would really recommend that Blizzard does something about this. Either if there is only one caster, they've got to target melee. If you've decided to come in with that rates, that dungeon setup in a challenge mode, that is your own stupid fucking fault. If you're in there as a normal, it doesn't really matter. The boss is still going to die if a melee occasionally gets chased by a tornado and so on and so forth. Just if the number can be down to like 1 ranged, 1 healer, then mechanics need to adjust themselves for that because it's so fucking boring to have everything chasing you, and this does play into the last fight. However, if you have a balanced setup, or a more balanced setup, which would be a tank, a melee, 2 ranged, and a healer. This fight's a lot of fun. A lot of decisions to do, and you can easily plan out the things that are going on. And ultimately, it's about whether or not you're in the water or not. This is what this whole fight boils down to. Again, it's not the most interesting fight. Her and Serpentrix are just not the best. But that's okay, because you're about to get one of the best bosses in fucking Legion. In Legion. This fight, if you, as I said earlier, if as we approach the Wrath of Azshara and bring down the shield, you will have a feeling of, oh god, or oh my, this is great. If you ever did do Alakir progress, particularly heroic Alakir, then this fight will just be an absolute cakewalk to you and not seem like the chaos and nightmare that it is for everybody else. And if you haven't had Alakir progress or a fight similar to that, which I can't really think concerning the mechanics of Wrath of Azshara, then you're just going to be like, oh my god, oh god, oh god, there's all kinds of things going on. How do we even survive this? The greatest thing about this is this fight tricks you in many ways. One, Wrath of Azshara does not start at full health, which makes a lot of sense considering what it is. And also, the fight gets more powerful and more dangerous the lower the health of Wrath of Azshara actually gets. Particularly around 10%, this fight is going to start to really screw you up. In which case you want to save cooldowns to that point. The first part is like, oh, okay, this isn't too bad. And then by 10%, the whole room is absolute full chaos, and you're just going to be trying to work out what's going on. And all they've done is create a lot of things that involve a lot of movement. So if your class suffers from mobility, sucks to be you. But they've done some combinations of things, such as waves, which cause you to move, which is very, 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 very similar to the tornadoes on Alakir. They also have debuffs, where you'll need to group up, so once again, static charges, and very similar debuffs where you have to spread out. So you're going to be, they've made mechanics here that force you to expand and contract as a group while simultaneously forcing you to run in all different kinds of directions. If you're in a disorganized or random group, what you'll tend to find happens is the biggest wiper on this fight is people get so fucking put off by the amount of shit going on the screen and the dangers that they face. I'll give you an example. The waves will pretty much one-shot you in heroic. I've had them hit me for like, I don't know, 700,000 at some points, maybe even a double one if I got accidentally caught in it. That they'll end up spread all over the place. And as you can see, the environment in which you fight Wrath of Azshara is really large, and you'll be very quickly out of range of healers, and the tank might start spinning the boss, and then all these kind of things start happening together, and mad craziness occurs. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, I really suggest you check out my positioning videos for raiding, in which case you'll see this happening sort of in action, where one action of one player leads to a huge amount of butterfly effect type things occurring in different parts of the instance as people try to adjust to that one player causing that initial problem. One issue causes 5 later down the line. And that is your general problem here. The actual trick of the fight is to stay very, very close as a group and just deal with the mechanics. So as I said, if you've done Alakir and moved in and out of tornadoes without difficulty while staying as a full entire 25-man raid group, then you're not going to have difficulty doing this. But everyone else is really going to struggle to learn it, but I'm glad they will learn it, and you'll have to learn it to defeat this, particularly on heroic. You're going to have to learn to deal with these mechanics. Even if they turn them down, it's all about positioning, and I love positioning fights. On top of the expanding and contraction, you'll also have a very interesting debuff to deal with, which is a very, very large and explosive bomb. However, this bomb doesn't disappear when it can be dispelled, and in fact, you don't want to dispel it straight away. This is very similar to Halion. For any of you who actually did Halion back in the day, you will know what I'm talking about. The actual idea with this is you take the bomb somewhere else, then have it dispelled. That does not mean the bomb disappears. In fact, the bomb is going to continue. It is just no longer attached to a player. It's no longer tethered. It will fall wherever you had it dispelled, which means dispelling it in the wrong place, oh dear. These are all things that add up to a really fun, engaging, and intense boss battle that is not that difficult once you figure out something as simple as positioning. And they give you plenty of in-game notifications of things you should and should not be doing, which means you should be able to pick up what's going on here, even if you've never encountered any of the bosses I've talked about earlier on. I give this dungeon a stellar 8 out of 10, only let down by the kind of weak sauce bosses, which are Serpentrix and the Naga, as they're just not that interesting, unfortunately. Lady Hatecoil, they're just not that amazing, and they feel really out of place in dungeons where we have cool mechanics going on elsewhere. Both the King Deepbeard and Warlord Parjesh both have interesting things that are to be done that aren't just straight up nuke the boss. Lady Hatecoil kind of does, but ultimately it has some really irritating mechanics that go along with it that aren't fun. The other mechanics are fun at the same time as being interesting, and that's the difference that I'll make there. So the Eye of Azshara, ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you really look forward to playing this for yourself, because it's a shitload of fun. Alright guys, I'll see you again. Bye bye.